Hi, Candice. Welcome to the Integrative Health Coach Success Podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yes, thanks for being here. I'm looking forward to our conversation today. And I think it's going to kind of go in a direction that a lot of our fellow IHPs and other health coaches listening will be able to relate to. So I'm looking forward to it. Would you first start by sharing with our listeners a little bit about what you're currently doing with your IHP certification?
Yeah, so I'm so excited to be here, and I'm excited to have been asked to speak. I was a little nervous because I guess you don't realize when you do, like, when you put yourself out there like that people are actually interested in what you have to say. So currently I have my own practice that I bring clients in basically word of mouth. I don't do any kind of websites or marketing. It has all been referral and word of mouth. So that's been really exciting. And so in my practice, I just help whoever comes, men and women. I do a lot of focus on nutrition, as far as helping them understand their bodies and eating and moving their bodies, kind of those foundational things that all of us can do, whether we have money or not. And we do labs, we do all kinds of things to help people really understand what's going on in their body that's causing their symptoms that they're dealing with at any given time.
That's great. Do you have a specific kind of group that you tend to work more with, or that you find kind of a little bit more passion behind as far as coaching?
Yeah, I do have clients that are all over the spectrum, young, more seasoned in life, as I would like to say, men, women. But I would say probably my favorite group to work with is that the women in about that 35 to 50 range, just because that's kind of the season I'm in as well. Mothers, busy mothers, looking to understand health, not only for themselves so that they can be better mothers, wives, business women, whatever they're accomplishing in their life, but also that that can trickle down into their families. And so that's probably the core, the meat of my practice and business is women in that age range.
Yeah, that's great. And have you always been interested in health and wellness? Has it always been the career space that you were in? Or what were you currently, or what were you, sorry, doing before you found IHP and all of that?
So no, I haven't always been interested in health and wellness. I did not grow up in a family that was focused on health and wellness. I did not grow up with that really being talked about at all, other than my mother is a nurse. So it was very Western medicine, more not health and wellness, more so like if you feel bad, your mom's like, hey, well, you probably have gas. Like you break your arm and your mom's like, you have gas, because she's a nurse. And so it was never really about being healthy. It was very just about, moving on with your life. And we didn't eat well, we didn't exercise. It's just not something we did. And out of college, and then I got married, I started working in the hospital system because I feel like I was always drawn to health and wellness, but I didn't know that's what I was drawn to, because I just thought it was medical that I was drawn to. And I knew I didn't want to be a doctor or a nurse. I didn't want to work on that side. I wanted to do more administration and education. And so I moved in, I got a job in the hospital system locally where I live. And I started doing public relations, marketing, and community health education. And that's what I did. And working in the hospital system really opened my eyes to a lot of things. Besides the fact I was dealing with my own things at such a young age, and I was going to doctors who were just throwing medicine at me. If I heard it one time at the hospital, I heard it 10 times a day of a doctor telling someone who has been admitted to the hospital, if you would have lost 5 or 10 pounds, you probably wouldn't be here. And that really just caught my attention. And I'm so thankful it did. And so that was in my early 20s. And that caught my attention. And I really started focusing on, like, what do they mean by that? And that's what propelled me into the health and wellness. I didn't come here because I'd always been passionate or interested in it. I came because I was tired of seeing sick people continue to be sick and thinking, gosh, there's got to be a different way than this. Seeing people take handfuls of prescription medicine in my own family, I just thought, man, there's got to be something different out there that is better than what we're currently doing. And so that's from there, I started educating, going back to school, dabbling in more things. And that landed me 10 years later in the IHP program.
Oh, that's great. And it's so interesting that, 10 years prior, you were in some sort of a health focused environment and your passion was education, or you even said, now that that's what you're doing, right? But like it seems like there's always been a spark of like education, and how if you were simply educated differently, you could make different choices, which is going to kind of be a little bit of our topic that we're going to chat about now, which is kind of what you believe to be the most important aspect of your role as a coach. And I've already teased it, but would you say it's education as far as what you bring to your clientele?
Yeah, I would definitely say that's something that not only am I passionate about, but I do well at. Somebody told me once I have a really good gift for explaining things kind of on a third grade level so that people can understand it. Because I don't know about you, or the people listening may resonate with this as well. Most of the medical health information out there, clinical information, is very wordy and very heavy descriptively. And I can read it and understand it, but most people cannot. And the information is valuable and important, but if we can't comprehend what we're reading, then what's the point of it? And so that has always been, when I worked in the hospital system, same as now, that kind of transitioned over to what I do now, is just this ability and this desire to help a third grader understand what's important about their body, how it works, and how to fuel it for health.
Yes. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And the truth is the medical system, yes, is super wordy, but so can the natural health space. I mean, people will talk about, this process and that process and vitamin D synthesis, and it can get pretty complex pretty fast. And even though it's all the information that like we believe to be true, if somebody just listened to it who had no idea what they were trying to understand, it would be pretty hard for them to kind of put it into practice. Um, what's your kind of what do you believe is the biggest advantage to like educating somebody well? So if you have a well-educated client, then what? Somebody who understands, right, what you're trying them to get them to understand.
If I have a well-educated client, if I've done my job correctly, and I've gotten them to a place where not only can they understand how their body is working, what their body needs in order to support it, but also how to decipher even what you're saying in the health world. Because gosh, how many conflicting things are out there, right? We see it, we're inundated with it, especially on social media. Everybody has an opinion about this, and what's right, like who knows what's right. And so if I do my job well and educate someone to how their specific body works and their individual needs, then I feel like I have equipped them with everything they need to move forward in life without me having to be right next to them. They could just then think of me as like the little angel, or sometimes the devil, if they're trying to do things they shouldn't be doing, right? But on their shoulder, that's always like, oh yeah, I remember that she told me this does this to my body, or my body doesn't respond well to this. And so if I can get someone to buy into the why, to understand the why are we doing this, the how of that becomes much easier. For instance, if we understand that um, that when we're very, very stressed, what it does to our body, and why our body is responding this way is because of our stress, then it's a little bit easier when I say, okay, here's how we're going to manage that stress. somebody's more likely to say, oh, well, I understand that. That makes sense to me. So yeah, I'm going to do that. I'm going to go do breathing techniques or grounding or take this supplement because I understand what the reason that I'm doing that, instead of just throwing a bunch of things at them and saying, good luck, let's throw it. It's like throwing spaghetti on a wall and hoping it sticks. I want people to feel confident in the how of when I implement these things. I may not see the results right away. I may not even feel the results right away, but I know that it's helping my body because I understand the why.
Yes. Yeah. I think you make such a great point right there at the end, which is some of this stuff doesn't, like, you don't just wake up one day after day one of, doing deep breathing, grounding, and cutting your caffeine down a little bit and automatically feel, 40 times better. But if you can understand why you're continuing to build on these habits, and you're understanding why you're going to be putting a certain amount of attention towards these things, then you can kind of trust in the process differently. And it's no different with kids, right? We all have this like innate nature of, I mean, my kids are 10 times more likely to do something if they understand why I'm asking them to do it, right? Other than just like, do it. And they're always like, why? Right? It's just an inquisitive part of our nature to want to know what it is we're trying to accomplish. And you can kind of relax into the process differently if you understand why you're going about something without seeing the results, right? The results, yes, are motivating once they start to come, but they don't come overnight, especially with so many kind of chronic conditions like stress, right? It didn't get to that point overnight. It's not going to go away overnight. Do you find that that's true, that it kind of allows clients to like trust in what they're doing a little bit differently?
Absolutely. And I think also because I'm supporting clients along the way and giving them that encouragement and sharing my own story and I try to be very transparent with my own story as well and authentic in who I am. I think it helps them a lot. I mean, I if you set the expectation on the front end, then that helps people with their goals, with the things that they're going after. And I know for me, when I'm educating clients, I always tell them we want to be really consistent. This is after I've just, I've explained this is what's going on in your body. We want to be really consistent for at least 1 month of every 10 years you've been alive. So if you're 50, you need to be consistent at least 5 months before you come and complain to me that it's not working. Like I don't mean that to sound harsh in any way, but I have found that just little analogy helps so many people think, oh, well, I mean, because I didn't get, we'll stick with the number 50, but if you're 50, you didn't get where you were in a week. You
Mm.
got there in 50 years. So we're so unrealistic sometimes with our health, me included. And I know I do this every day, right? I get frustrated and I want everything to be faster because we live in a microwave society. And again, we're inundated on social media with these quick fixes and things that aren't necessarily supporting our health, but make you look like you want to look or whatever. And so I understand that frustration, but if you can stop and say, okay, well, my body got to this because of 50 years or even 10 years of mistreating it. Well, I can't expect in a week for me to just be like, voila, I'm better. And it ebbs and flows. It takes consistency. So that is always the expectation I kind of set is you need to give it, and I'm talking consistency for a month for every 10 years you've been alive. And then after that, let's regroup. Let's habit build. Let's make the changes we need to make. But let's shoot for consistency.
Yes. Yeah, I completely agree. I recently was reviewing a HTMA for a gentleman who was 68, a hair tissue mineral analysis for a gentleman who was 68. And his daughter had recently done one, and she was actually an IHP. And he said, we live in the same town. We don't live in the same house, but we have the same water. I was talking about the heavy metals that it found likely being his water source. He said, how come hers aren't showing it if it's the water? And I said, well, you're 68 and she's 31. So you've been on this toxic planet 37 years longer than she has. Like, you have way more of potential of accumulating this stuff, through the years, and he was like, oh, that makes sense, right? But like surface level is like, we're drinking the same water. How come we don't have the same test? But when you break it down, I think as IHPs, when we kind of become immersed in this culture, we think that like everybody has this knowledge. It becomes so second nature to us. It becomes such like our language that it's like, wait, how do you not understand these things? And we have to remember that it's not just like a normal language for a lot of people, and breaking it down in very simple to understand ways. And like we were saying, educating them on, okay, you're 50. It's been 50 years of what not, stress. It's been 50 years of toxic products, or you name it. And it's going to take longer for you to get rebalanced than say a 25-year-old who's only had 25 years of all of that, imbalance. Do you find that some people resonate quicker with all of that? Or do you find that older populations, or seasoned, as you said, which I love, do you find that it's harder for them to kind of like grasp some of what you're saying, or is the younger, or do you find that it's just kind of your boundary that you set and you're like, listen, it's going to take us this long to get, very consistent with your behavior, with your habits, for us to see some sort of a change, and you need to be patient? Or is it personality that can kind of differ as far as responses?
Yeah. Um, I would definitely say our more seasoned friends are very set in their ways. They
Mhm.
are harder, not always, it's hard to put somebody in a group just because of their age or whatever, but it's definitely harder for them to grasp, especially like changing up their daily routine or their food habits, or that can be more difficult because they've done something the same way for so long.
Mhm.
But I also find in those clients that if I can say, hey, you've done the same thing for so long and this is how you feel. So to keep doing that is literally the definition of insanity. Um, doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result.
Mhm.
So you're basically, you're going to drive yourself crazy. So let's try it my way. And I usually do smaller chunks of time for them. But sometimes I do have younger people. It's really tricky because I have the seasons who have always done it a certain way. And that is that saying, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Well, yes, you can, because we do it all the time. But then I have this younger group that thinks they know everything because they have access to Google and social media. And like I said, um, they're inundated with lots of things. And so sometimes, if I'm being truthful, I would much rather have a seasoned person who's like, well, I've always done this, and be able to educate them, than a younger adult or a younger young adult that is so resistant because they're like, well, so and so says to do it this way. And, it's like always conflicting information.
Mhm.
And so that it's kind of my middle people. That's why I kind of like that age I told you was my favorite.
Yes.
That's that middle ground of people who are like, I don't think I know everything, but I also am willing to make some changes. So that's probably why I said that's my favorite age range.
Yes. Yeah, I totally agree. Especially with your like analysis of the younger population, which is they like, I'll suggest X amount of, protein, carbohydrates, and fat, for instance, and they'll come back and be like, do you know who so and so is on social media? She's da 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 da. Well, she said that if I, eat this much carbohydrates, that it's not good for like the toenail growth on my left foot. And I'm like, okay. So let's like they kind of have way too much access to information. And, once they kind of get sold on something, and then you kind of are always like defending your point of view. Although at this point, I'm totally past that. I'm like, listen, if you want to listen to so and so, maybe she's taking clients.
That's what me too. I'm pretty, at first when I became a new IHP, I felt like I had to help everybody, and that if I didn't, it was my fault, if that makes sense. And now I've gotten to where I'm like, Okay, I know what I know. I'm not saying I know everything. I am constantly learning. So I would say that for IHPs out there to always be learning, always be evolving, because this is still science, and you should hold science loosely because it's always changing, always evolving. So don't pretend like I know everything, but I'm pretty set in what I do know and what I have to bring to the table. And so sometimes I have to recognize for a client that I just might not be their right fit, and that's okay. At first, it used to upset me because I'm like, oh, you're running and you want to help everybody, but also you're kind of building your clientele or whatever it is, and so you feel like you have to accept everyone, and then eventually you get to a spot where you're like, okay, that stress is not worth what it's doing to me, and so just let them go, let them. Let them go to the influencer that's also selling them steam mops and things like that. They'll eventually be back, right? They'll eventually come back and say, well, she never even got, or she or he never even got back to me, or they didn't coach me. And I'm like, welcome back, friend.
Yes. Yeah. Yep. So as far as what you said is with, wanting to, help everybody and, kind of holding on. Sometimes I find that like that prevents, right? Like your perfect niche client to come to you, right? The ones that kind of make you feel like you're not even working because it's so seamless. And so yeah, I completely agree. And that's totally I feel like normal at the beginning for most IHPs to kind of feel that way. But letting them kind of go find who they might be better aligned with is both good for you and them for sure. Yeah. When you're kind of educating and explaining whys and all of that, and actually there was one thing that I wanted to go back to and I was like, wait, what was it? So I'm going to go back to it and then I'm going to ask my question. You said kind of you're set in your knowledge, right? To some extent you're probably set in the ways of the stuff that doesn't change. There's constants, constant things that are good for health, like get sunshine, move your body, eat good quality food, to lower your stress, sleep well, drink water, right? Like those are things that most health and wellness professionals, if they're not talking about them, are almost being too trendy. Like whoever's not talking about the boring, constant foundations and are like grasping at the extras and missing that part, like those are the ones that, are probably not going to have lasting results with their clientele. Would you agree?
Oh, 100%. I tell people all the time. I literally, before this call, was on the phone with the client, and she's habit building. So she's trying some new strategies, building on top of the ones that she's already started. And she's like, I'm overwhelmed. I'm overwhelmed. And I said, okay, well, we're not going to be overwhelmed because that's not good for your health and your stress. So I want you to stop and go back to the foundations. Are you sleeping? Are you moving your body? Are you putting whole foods in your body? Are you drinking water? What you said, they're boring, right? I always say, tell everybody you need to get a 20-minute daily dose of sunshine on the skin and in the eyes. Are you doing those things? If not, just go back to those things. You feel overwhelmed, don't get overwhelmed and stressed and quit. Just stop, go back to the boring stuff, because it is the very foundation of what everything is built on. So
Yes. And sometimes the the extra stuff isn't needed if the boring stuff is checked off, right? Sometimes we can kind of do the foundations at first and then you're like, "Oh, good, I'm feeling better. Now I'm going to like skimp on my sleep and take that supplement for, my anxiety that comes up every day at 4 p.m." or, we can kind of get a little bit uh yeah, we can think that we can push the envelope a little bit, but sometimes when we're feeling good, it's because we're doing the foundational stuff. And the more that we veer from that, the more that we need the, shiny extras, whether it be supplements or, devices, all the things, because there's so many things marketed now. I mean, like the red light therapy and the this and the that, and whether it's, topical stuff for your skin or things to make you, feel a certain, it's great. There's so many things at our disposal, and some of them are amazing, but a lot of them would be unneeded if people did the basics.
absolutely.
Yeah. When you kind of work with the stress population, I want to go back to the like client that was feeling overwhelmed. Do you find that um oftentimes like it's hard to pare them down. I'll share what I find with clients and see if you agree, which is that clients who are stressed are actually trying to do too many things. And sometimes it's like hard for them to actually think like, okay, all I have to do is like worry about my sleep and what I'm eating. And they think that you're going to just like give them more things. When I actually ask a client to do less, it's hard for them to like conceptualize doing less, and they actually like want to do more. Do you find that at all with like the clients who are super stressed?
Yeah, not every client. I do have some really good ones that are very thoughtful, but for the larger part, yes. I feel like sometimes if I'm doing less, then I'm lazy, or and we live in a society that rewards busyness and hustle. I mean, literally, that's what's pushed on us all the time, is this hustle culture to do all of these things. And I would honestly say that, gosh, that it's really, that's what's putting our health at such risk, especially in America, is that we don't ever just do less,
Mm,
just slow down. And so we're so tapped into this bit that we wear busyness like a badge of honor.
mhm.
And the more busy, especially as a mom, I see this a lot with moms, with kids. We carry around that busyness badge, thinking it, makes us important, or makes us better than, appear a certain way, when really it's not doing anything but affecting our health. And so those people, I do find, when I say, hey, you need to do less, they really struggle with that mentally, not
Mhm.
because they don't want to do it, but because mentally they just think, well, if I'm not busy, then I'm not doing enough, I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And so I think a lot of that is our culture, though, the what our culture and society has fed to us.
Yes, yeah, I completely agree. And it's kind of their worth is tied to the amount that they produce, the busyness that they, have, the amount of honestly like stress and the go, go, go. That's what's directly tied to their, worth as a mom, their worth as a woman, if they're kind of doing it all. Because I think while yes, women, we have amazing advantages to being able to enter the workforce and, following our passions, there's like this pedestal for like, oh, the mom that does it all. People say to me like, I don't know how you do it, and it's like in a very ad admiring type of tone. And I feel like women can get sucked into that, and sometimes I'm like, oh, I'm doing it, but like I'm not doing it all well or perfectly, like, right, we're kind of like afraid to not hold it together. And I feel like it's a little bit of that cultural influence, like you said, where it's driving this certain persona that women feel like if they're not doing it, like they're not like, well, okay, so what am I worth if I'm not quote doing it all?
Yeah. I mean, you and I could probably do a whole podcast on just that topic.
Yes.
Our culture and society is affecting women's health,
Yes.
and specifically that busyness. So, gosh, I mean, I could talk about that for a whole podcast, but
Yes. And I think, if we tie it back to what our topic was, which is like education, right? I say this to women all the time, like, listen, really examine how much of what you're doing is trying to prove something, or is resonating with what you truly find to be soul fulfilling. And just asking questions to clients, how much of what you do you love? Or right, and educating them by even asking questions can be such an empowering way to get them to shift some of kind of like how they're showing up, right? Because if we can, like we were saying before, educate them and get their minds in a different different focus, and we can take some of the stress off of their lives, we know that a lot of what they're coming to initially for can shift, like hormones, like weight loss, like their maybe mental state, right, of all of that.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's uh do you have, sometimes I ask my IHPs if they have like one piece of advice for other IHPs, just starting out. So, we talked a little bit about kind of the whole, oh, not taking you at first, you might have taken clients that didn't necessarily 100% resonate. Would you have uh a source of kind of little inspiration, do this, not that, or if a new IHP was listening?
I think you. my advice would be to just get started. I
Mm,
think a lot of times we all think everything has to be perfect before we can actually launch ourselves out there to the public, or when we do launch ourselves out there and immediately we don't get the likes or the comments or the clients, we just quit
mm,
because we think it has to be perfect. And it doesn't have to be perfect. Um, Perfectionism is like the ultimate failure because you're never going to reach it, right? Like you're not. So to just get started, don't be afraid to say I'm sorry. Usually those first, especially those first clients, are people who know and love you. This is your time to mess up. Like
yep,
I know it was for me, like those people love me, so I was able to come back and say, hey, like I didn't understand that lab correctly, or I'm still learning, and they were so gracious. But you have to get started. If you don't get started, you'll spend all your time overthinking about it and you'll stay stuck. And there you've been given everything that you need. The education from Dr. Cabral is incredible. He's always adding things. And again, remembering that you are always learning. You're not going to just do IHP and watch the videos once and then be like the best and out there. I mean, I go back and watch, and I have to go back and listen, and I consult other IHPs because I'm like, hey, I don't remember that. I can't, my mind can't even hold all of what he holds in his brain. But just don't be afraid to get started because you're afraid of messing up or waiting for it to be perfect, because it's just not going to be. And that's okay, because that's the beauty of what we do. And I know for me, that's a lot of what attracts clients to me, is that I try to be authentic and transparent and just who I am. And they resonate with that. They connect with that because they see me as someone who's just like them, not someone who is above them or is going to talk down to them. They see me as someone who's struggling with the same life things that they're struggling with. I'm just a little further ahead in my health journey than they are, so they're willing to listen, right? So that would be my best piece: is get started. Don't try to be perfect.
yes, yeah, it's great advice. We've talked about that before. It ultimately is the only thing that's holding you back is your own kind of perfectionist tendency or need for it to be like just so. Yeah, and the uh, Joel Evans, I believe, was an interview that I did, and his saying is like take messy action, like just it's not going to be perfect, but do something to get started. So yes, I completely agree.
I told somebody yesterday in a that I was helping, that's doing something similar to this, and I just said, massive action solves all doubt, because
Mhm.
you learn as you go.
Yep. Yep, absolutely. If people are listening and they want to kind of connect with you further, where are all the places that they can find you? Website, social media.
I'm just on social media. I think I mentioned that at the beginning. I do everything just from there and from referrals, but you can find me on Instagram at candice.mauldin.wellness. And then on Facebook, I am Candice Low Mauldin, and you can follow me there.
Great. Thank you so much for being a guest on the Integrative Health Coach Success Podcast. This was such a fun interview for me. I appreciate sharing everything that you did with our listeners.
Oh, thanks so much for having me.
Thanks, Candice.